You drive away from your local auto parts store with a $5 filter in a shiny box, thinking your engine is safe. You feel good about it. But I have spent 15 years on the shop floor tearing down destroyed Ford engines, and I can tell you that the filter you just screwed onto your block might be the exact component quietly grinding your bearings to dust. A bad oil filter is a silent killer. It does not throw a dashboard code, it does not make a noise, and it will not cause a single symptom on the day it fails. What it actually does is collapse under oil pressure, allow raw contaminants into your oil passages, or bypass filtration entirely when your Ford needs it most. By the time you notice the damage, scored crankshaft journals, ruined camshaft lobes, or a seized turbocharger, the filter is long gone. And I am the guy writing you a $5,000 engine replacement estimate. The filter on your Ford is not just a passive wire mesh strainer sitting there catching dirt. It is an active mechanical component featuring a calibrated bypass valve, a flexible anti-drainback valve, and a porous filter media designed to survive extreme pressure spikes and massive temperature swings. When any one of those internal elements is cheaply constructed, your oil is not protected, even if the filter fits perfectly and the oil looks clean on your dipstick. I have personally inspected hundreds of failed engines, and almost every single one could have been saved by avoiding a few specific filter traps. Let us start with the first massive mistake I see every single week: no-name filters from online marketplaces. You are scrolling through a website and find a pack of 4 filters for your EcoBoost or Coyote engine for dirt cheap. You think, how bad can a metal can be? The problem is what happens inside that unbranded can at 3,000 RPM. These unverified overseas filters use cheap, inconsistent media that completely fails to meet the micron rating required by modern Ford engines. Even worse, the internal bypass valve, the emergency relief valve meant to open only when thick oil clogs the media, is calibrated entirely wrong. It often opens far too early, routing unfiltered, gritty oil straight into your engine bearings during normal driving. The rubber anti-drainback valve, which is supposed to keep oil inside the filter when the engine is turned off, is usually made of low-grade rubber that hardens and fails within weeks. Every time you start your vehicle, you get a dry start, scratching the internal metal surfaces before oil pressure finally builds. On a Ford EcoBoost, where clean oil pressure is the only thing keeping your turbocharger spinning safely at 100,000 RPM, saving $2 on a filter can easily trigger a $3,000 turbo failure. The second trap is rebranded wholesale filters sold under familiar-sounding names. These filters catch a lot of smart DIYers because the boxes are cleverly designed to look like premium products. But when I cut these cans open on my workbench, I find a filter manufactured to the absolute lowest specification imaginable. Quality filter media uses a precise blend of synthetic glass and cellulose fibers to trap microparticles without restricting the oil's flow. These cheap wholesale filters rely heavily on low-grade cellulose, which is essentially thick paper. This paper absorbs moisture, degrades under high engine heat, and eventually sheds its own fibrous material directly into your clean oil. Ford engines feature incredibly tight oil passage tolerances. When a filter begins shedding its own structure, those fibers migrate directly to your cam journals and lifter bores, choking off lubrication. You saved a couple of bucks at the counter, but you put a ticking time bomb on your engine block. Next are filters engineered with the completely wrong bypass valve pressure rating. This is a technical failure point that most owners completely overlook, but I see it ruin engines constantly. Every oil filter has a bypass valve designed to open at a very specific pressure differential, typically between 8 and 25 pounds per square inch, depending on your exact Ford engine. If the pressure across the filter media gets too high, like during a cold winter start when the oil is thick as syrup, the valve opens so your engine does not starve for oil. Generic aftermarket filters use a one-size-fits-all valve that is rarely calibrated correctly for a Ford. If the valve rating is too low, it stays open constantly, running raw, dirty oil through your engine during everyday highway driving. If it is too high, it restricts oil flow during critical cold starts, starving your top-end components when they need lubrication most. Then we have the filters advertising extreme extended intervals without any verified media, to back up the claim. The marketing on the box promises 15 or 20,000 miles of protection, which sounds fantastic if you want to save time. But cheap extended interval filters use marketing language rather than real engineering. As the miles pile up, low-quality media quickly loses its structural integrity, losing up to 30% of its filtration efficiency halfway through the oil's lifespan. Ford uses an intelligent oil life monitoring system that calculates oil degradation based on driving conditions and engine load. If you pair that system with a filter that stops trapping dirt after 5,000 miles, you are driving around with false confidence while abrasive sludge accumulates in your variable valve timing solenoids. I also see people installing heavy-duty diesel filters on small gasoline engines. This usually happens when someone cross-references a thread size and finds a massive diesel filter that physically screws onto their gasoline engine's oil adapter plate. They think a bigger filter means better filtration. That is a dangerous misconception. Diesel filters are engineered around vastly different flow rates, completely different oil viscosities, and entirely separate bypass valve pressures than a gasoline engine requires. A diesel filter on an EcoBoost engine will completely alter your oil pressure characteristics, causing the bypass valve to malfunction and starve your critical engine bearings of necessary oil pressure during startup. Another massive trend I see in the performance community is magnetic aftermarket filters with unverified bypass systems. A lot of Mustang owners love the idea of using magnets to catch ferrous metal wear particles. While the theory makes sense, the aftermarket market is absolutely flooded with unregulated garbage. The magnet might catch a few steel flakes, but the internal bypass valves in these unverified units are often made from cheap rubber compounds that completely dissolve when exposed to modern synthetic oil additives. Once that rubber degrades, the bypass valve sticks wide open, routing all the dirty oil right past the filter media. The final hidden danger is old stock filters that have completely passed their shelf life. People do not realize that oil filters expire. The internal elastomeric seals and rubber anti-drainback valves begin to degrade, dry out, and harden the moment they are manufactured. If a filter has been sitting in a humid warehouse or on a dusty back shelf for 5 or 6 years, that rubber loses all its flexibility. When you screw it onto your engine, the hardened anti-drainback valve allows all the oil to drain right back into the oil pan every single time you shut the vehicle off. Every single morning, your engine suffers a brutal dry start, wearing away the protective hydrodynamic film on your bearings before the pump can prime the system again. If you want to keep your Ford out of my service bay, you need to use filters that actually deliver verified performance. First on that list is Motorcraft. They are engineered to Ford's exact structural specifications, ensuring the perfect bypass pressure and a high-grade silicone anti-drainback valve that handles extreme heat without hardening. Second is Wix, a brand that has delivered exceptional media construction and robust build quality for decades. Third is Purolator Pure One, which utilizes a premium synthetic blend media that offers incredible particle capture efficiency without restricting oil flow. Fourth is Bosch Distance Plus, a heavy-duty option built with heavy-gauge internal components designed to maintain filtration efficiency over long intervals. Fifth is Royal Purple Extended Life, which features a full synthetic media and a reinforced center tube that holds up perfectly under high-performance driving conditions. Choosing the right filter is the cheapest insurance policy you can buy for your vehicle, but choosing the wrong one can easily total your engine. While these 5 trusted filters will keep your oil clean and your pressure stable, a filter is only one piece of the puzzle. There are several other critical factory settings and hidden components built into your vehicle right now that are quietly working against your engine's longevity, waiting to cause catastrophic failure the moment your warranty expires. We just uncovered how a cheap, unverified oil filter acts like a slow-moving cancer inside your Ford's lubrication system, starving your bearings and clogging your variable valve timing components during daily driving. But as destructive as a bad filter is, it still relies on you making a poor choice at the auto parts counter. What if I told you there is a completely separate factory setting one that came programmed into your vehicle right from the assembly line, that is doing 5 times more damage to your engine every single day you drive it. This is the setting that causes the absolute most mechanical destruction in modern Ford engines. And the worst part is, most owners think it is actually helping them. I am talking about the factory-programmed automatic start-stop system, paired with the hyper-aggressive logic of the transmission's eco mode. To understand why this factory configuration is a mechanical nightmare, we have to look at the foundational physics of how an engine protects itself. When your engine is running normally at highway speeds, your crankshaft, connecting rods, and camshafts do not actually touch the metal bearings they sit in. They ride on a microscopic pressurized barrier of oil, called a hydrodynamic film. As long as that film of oil is maintained by the oil pump, you have virtually zero metal-on-metal wear. The parts are floating. But the moment that engine shuts off at a red light, your oil pump stops spinning instantly. Oil pressure drops to zero. That microscopic film of oil gets squeezed out from between the heavy crankshaft journals and the soft bearing shells due to the sheer weight and tension of the engine components. The engine rests metal on metal. When the light turns green and the computer cracks the starter motor to fire the engine back up, those components grind directly against each other for a fraction of a second before the oil pump can repressurize the passages and lift the metal surfaces apart again. In a traditional vehicle without this factory setting, an engine might experience this brutal metal-on-metal transition 3 or 4 times a day. But with Ford's factory start-stop programming enabled, that transition happens 30, 40, or 50 times during a single afternoon commute. You are compressing 20 years' worth of wear cycles into just a few years of standard driving. Let me give you a real-world example from my shop floor last Tuesday. A customer towed in a 2021 Ford F-150 equipped with the 3.5-liter EcoBoost V8. The truck had exactly 62,000 miles on the odometer, just barely past the factory powertrain warranty. The owner was meticulous. He changed his oil every 5,000 miles using premium full synthetic oil and OEM motorcraft filters. Yet, the engine was making a horrific, deep rhythmic knocking sound from the bottom end. When I dropped the oil pan and pulled the main bearing caps, what I found was sickening. The copper backing on the crankshaft bearings was completely exposed. The protective overlay had been entirely scraped away, and the crankshaft itself was deeply scored. The customer was in total shock. He kept asking me, "How did this happen?" I did all the maintenance. I hooked up my diagnostic scanner and pulled the engine's operational history from the computer module. That truck had logged over 48,000 individual automated start-stop events in its short life. The factory programming had quite literally restarted the engine to death, grinding those bearings down to dust at every single traffic light, stop sign, and drive-through lane while the owner sat inside thinking he was saving a few pennies on fuel. That oversight cost him a $7,000 long block and engine replacement. It gets even more dangerous when you factor in how this system interacts with the turbochargers on an EcoBoost engine. Turbochargers run white hot because they are driven directly by glowing exhaust gases, often reaching internal temperatures exceeding 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. When you pull off the highway after a hard drive and stop at an exit ramp, the factory logic shuts the engine down immediately to save fuel. When the engine dies, the oil flow to those glowing turbocharger bearings stops instantly. The stagnant oil sitting inside the turbo bearing housing immediately reaches its boiling point. It undergoes a thermal destruction process called oil coking. The oil literally bakes into a hard, abrasive carbon crust inside the turbo oil lines and cartridge. The next time the engine starts, those hard carbon flakes break free and scrape across the turboshaft bearings, destroying the precision tolerances until the turbo begins throwing oil into your intake and smoking like a chimney. Compounding this destruction is the factory-programmed eco-mode transmission logic. To hit stringent government fuel economy targets, Ford programs the transmission to upshift as fast as humanly possible, keeping the engine running at incredibly low RPMs, often hovering right around 1200 RPM while you are trying to accelerate up a hill. When you demand acceleration at such low engine speeds, it creates a condition called low-speed pre-ignition, or LSPI, alongside extreme engine lugging. Lugging the engine means you are putting maximum load on the pistons and connecting rods while the oil pump is spinning at its slowest possible speed. At 1200 RPM, your oil pump cannot generate thus massive volume and pressure required to maintain that protective hydrodynamic cushion under high load. The combustion forces literally slam the piston rods down onto the crankshaft, breaking through the thin oil film and hammering the bearing shells. It is the mechanical equivalent of hitting your engine bearings with a sledgehammer dozens of times a minute. You think you are taking care of your vehicle, but the factory settings are prioritizing a fractional increase in fleet fuel economy over the structural survival of your engine. The manufacturers know the vehicle only needs to survive until the end of the warranty period. Once you pass that mileage marker, the financial liability shifts entirely to your wallet. The fix for this is incredibly simple, yet Ford does not want you doing it. Every single time you climb into your vehicle and press the start button, you need to make it an absolute habit to reach over and press the button to deactivate the automatic start-stop system. Do not let the computer put your engine to sleep at every intersection. Furthermore, stop driving around in eco mode to save an unnoticeable amount of fuel. Run the vehicle in normal mode, or even sport mode when pulling heavy loads, to keep the engine RPMs up in a healthy range where the oil pump can actually provide adequate volume to cushion those critical load-bearing components. By disabling the automated shutdown and avoiding low RPM engine lugging, you immediately eliminate the primary cause of premature bearing fatigue and turbocharger coking in modern Ford powertrains. It costs you absolutely nothing to change these driving habits, yet it will do more to preserve the internal metallurgy of your engine than the most expensive synthetic oil money can buy. But your lubrication system and your transmission logic are not the only areas where factory configurations are cutting your vehicle's lifespan short. There are still multiple hidden software parameters and cooling system limitations engineered into these vehicles that are quietly cooking your transmission fluid and warping your cylinder heads without ever triggering a warning light on your dash. We have already pulled back the curtain on how subpar aftermarket filters restrict your oil flow and how the factory-programmed start-stop system, combined with low RPM engine lugging, actively hammers your bearings to pieces. Those two issues alone account for thousands of premature engine failures every single year. But there is one final, incredibly deceptive factory configuration that ties this entire web of destruction together. It is a setting that sits right in front of your face every single day on your dashboard, deliberately lying to you about the true health of your engine. I am talking about Ford's factory-programmed, heavily buffered dummy gauges and their overly optimistic, algorithms-based, intelligent oil life monitor. To understand why this is the ultimate mechanical betrayal, you have to look at how modern dashboard clusters are engineered. Decades ago, if your engine oil temperature spiked or your oil pressure dropped by even 5 pounds per square inch, the needles on your dashboard gauges moved instantly. You saw the danger coming in real time and could pull over before the metal melted. Today, the coolant temperature and oil pressure gauges on your dashboard are not real-time indicators. They are digital illusions controlled by the engine management computer. Ford programs these gauges with a massive normal buffering zone. This means that whether your engine coolant is running at a healthy 190 degrees or a dangerous 235 degrees, the needle stays pinned perfectly dead center. The computer intentionally dampens the needle's movement so owners do not panic and flood dealership service bays with complaints. By the time that needle finally jumps into the red zone and flashes a warning light, your aluminum cylinder heads are already warping, your head gasket is already breaching, and the engine has already suffered catastrophic thermal fatigue. This deceptive buffering becomes downright lethal when paired with the factory intelligent oil life monitor. Ford's marketing tells you that the computer tracks your cold starts, towing habits, and ambient temperatures to tell exactly when the oil needs to be changed, frequently stretching the interval out to 10,000 miles or even 12 months. But what the factory does not tell you is that this mathematical algorithm is highly flawed because it cannot physically measure the actual chemical state or contamination level of the oil. It assumes everything inside your engine is operating under perfect factory conditions. Let me show you how this plays out on the shop floor. A few months ago, a customer brought in a 2019 Explorer with the 2.3-liter EcoBoost engine. The vehicle had 80,000 miles on it, and the owner strictly followed the dashboard's oil life monitor, which usually told him to change the oil every 9,000 to 10,000 miles. His dashboard oil gauge always read perfect, right in the middle. But when I pulled the valve cover to investigate a timing chain noise, the entire top end of the engine looked like it had been filled with black, hardened asphalt. The variable valve timing phasers were completely packed with solid carbon sludge, and the timing chain guides had literally snapped because the lack of clean lubrication had caused the chain to stretch past its mechanical limit. The oil life monitor on his dash still read 40% life remaining. The algorithm had completely failed to account for a minor unmetered fuel dilution issue common in direct injection engines, where raw gasoline seeps past the piston rings and thins out the motor oil. Because the factory monitor was just guessing based on a programmed code rather than reality, it told the owner he was perfectly safe while his oil was being chemically thinned out and cooked into abrasive sludge. The dummy gauge kept reading normal while the cylinder head temperatures were spiking under the radar, destroying a $4,000 valve train system. When you synthesize all three of these hidden factory dangers, the low-quality oil filters, the punishing start-stop cycles, and the deceptive dashboard monitors, you see the complete picture of why modern engines are failing prematurely. A cheap filter allows microscopic debris to bypass the media. Then, the automatic start-stop setting forces the engine to grind its bearings metal on metal dozens of times a day, releasing tiny metal shavings into that dirty oil. Finally, the buffered dashboard settings and 10,000-mile oil change intervals ensure that you keep running that contaminated, sheared-out fluid through your engine for thousands of miles too long because the computer keeps telling you everything is perfectly fine. It is a perfect storm of engineered obsolescence that works beautifully to get the vehicle past its warranty period and straight into a scrapyard. But you do not have to let your vehicle fall victim to this cycle. Now that you know how the mechanism works, you can deploy a bulletproof prevention strategy to completely bypass these factory traps. First, throw away the idea of trailing your oil changes out to 10,000 miles just because a computer monitor tells you to. As a rule of thumb on my shop floor, no turbocharged Ford engine should ever go past 5,000 miles or 6 months on a single oil change, period. If you own a naturally aspirated Coyote V8 and do a lot of highway driving, you can push it to 6,000, but that is the absolute limit. You need to physically drain the contaminants and fuel dilution out of the oil pan before it has the chance to break down into sludge. Second, combine that strict 5,000-mile interval with one of the 5 verified premium filters we discussed earlier, like a Motorcraft OEM or a Wix, to guarantee the internal bypass valves and anti-drainback seals are actually functioning at the correct pressure ratings. Third, build the immediate muscle memory to deactivate the automatic start-stop system the exact second you turn your key or press the ignition button. Never let the vehicle drop its oil pressure at an intersection. Lastly, if you want true accuracy on how your vehicle is running, stop trusting the factory dummy dashboard needles. Hook up a real-time digital monitor or an OBD2 scanner display to your vehicle's diagnostic port so you can read the actual, unbuffered cylinder head temperatures and real oil pressure numbers as they happen. By taking control away from these factory configurations and implementing these simple, expert-backed maintenance adjustments, you can easily double the lifespan of your powertrain. You are shifting the odds back in your favor, protecting your investment, and keeping your hard-earned money out of my repair shop. If you want to keep exposing the hidden mechanical dangers that dealerships and manufacturers try to cover up, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below about what factory setting you are turning off today.